guys, hope you've had a good week. So today we're in the middle of the Omer now, and so I thought I would talk a little bit about the Tree of Life, about the Sfirot, about the Omer. The Omer is a time that starts with the first day of Pesach, basically, where we start counting the 7 lower Sfirot, or attributes, energy centers, however you think of it. And we start counting those and really doing like inward meditations on that for ourselves, leading all the way up to Shavuot, which is 7 weeks later. So there are 7 lower Sfirot, and each of the 7 weeks corresponds to 1. This is the Omer. And then each day of the 7 days of the week also corresponds to 1. So if you have Chesed, which is translated simply as loving kindness, is the first week, and then the first day is Chesed Sheva Chesed, or Chesed of Chesed. And then the second day is Gevurah, which is like boundaries. So then you get to contemplate your like boundaries within your loving kindness. Now, I always felt like that was a little vague, but since then, meaning since 15 years ago or 16 years ago or whenever I first started on this journey, well, I've really come to understand these concepts a lot deeper. So yeah, I thought, I could just go through the first 2 or the first couple with you guys and explain a little deeper. And, in the book that I have written with the cards, I really explain each concept kind of on its own. Like, what is Chesed? So let's talk about what is Chesed. Chesed is translated as loving kindness. It corresponds to the right arm. The meridian for it is right here in the middle of the chest. And Chesed balances out the left arm, which is Gevurah, and is boundaries, right? But Chesed, loving kindness, is intended to have a little bit more of a masculine energy. Not male, female, but masculine. And what I mean by that is this idea of this masculine energy that wants to give, this masculine energy that wants to provide and protect. That energy is Chesed, right? And so then we, the first week we get to tap into our Chesed, and Chesed is referred to as like when we do Chesed, we do something kind for someone, we volunteer, we give charity. That's called Chesed sometimes. But it really is that impulse to give from a place of love and kindness, to provide for and to care for and to protect those around us and those that we care about, and just others in general. And then so we think about really our giving within that. And then we think about our boundary within that. How does that come up? The light and shadow of that. And then like the third one is Tiferet, which I believe is this coming week, is the balance of those 2, right? So that's that's like the upper half. Tiferet's right here in your core, or maybe a little lower. And it's the balance of the giving and the receiving, the yes and the no, the sharing and the boundary. And that's the first 3 weeks. So then we'll just stick with those 3. I have been really reading a lot of Kabbalah maps, like put in your birth date, generate your chart, this past week. And it's interesting because there are 12 aspects of our personality that I'm using. There's 10 Sfirot with the Sfira of Da'at being kind of the one that fades in and out. We'll get into Da'at. Da'at's interesting. It's a bit complicated. It's complicated. So I'm using the 10 Sfirot and Da'at, and then like a more thematic Sfira as well. That's like not exactly the world, but just right now I'm just calling it like a thematic like lens through which the rest of them are playing out for you. And so if, for example, because like I explained before, each of the 7 days or of the week, and then 7 weeks. So out of the 7 weeks, if the first week is Chesed, then day 1 is Chesed of Chesed. Day 2 is Gevurah of Chesed. Day 3 is Tiferet of Chesed, right? So it's loving kindness of loving kindness, boundaries of loving kindness, balance of giving and receiving, of boundaries, yes and no, within loving kindness and giving, right? And so you really get to like go deep with yourself in that contemplation. Now, if it's Chesed of Chesed, that's your abundance pattern, is how I'm calling it. But if it's Chesed of Tiferet, let's just say, then that's kind of more of your outward facing personality. That's like kind of how you present. It's your core, right? So then the way you define it is going to be different. So how does Chesed, instead of calling it Chesed of Chesed, Chesed of Gevurah, Chesed of Tiferet, Chesed of Hod, Chesed of Netzach, Chesed of Yesod, like, unless you're very familiar with that, which I've become over, being very focused on this, that's kind of confusing. And it's a little bit of like I have to translate all of this, and it's like, it's sweet, but it doesn't go as deep. I mean, it goes plenty deep. It's a great meditation, but I translated it into different words. So you get to think of Chesed in terms of what is your, how does this concept of loving kindness and giving and providing for, protecting for, in that essence, how does it relate to the different patterns? And I'm going to read them. Let's just start with the Chesed though. How does it relate to your abundance pattern? The way that your unique being receives abundance. How does it relate to your conflict resolution pattern? How does it relate to just your personality? How does it relate to your relationship styles patterns, your communication patterns, and your, emotional patterns, your emotional responses? There's other ones too, but for me now I can really think of, where am I at with my Chesed, with my giving, protecting, providing, loving kindness, in the way that I receive abundance, in the way that I communicate, in the way that I emote, in the way that I relate. And then I can go through and ask the same questions when it comes to my boundaries, my no, my, discernment, my severity. How does that play a role in how I receive abundance? And you really get to think, is my Gevurah blocking me from abundance? Do I actually need a little bit more Gevurah so I'm not leaking energy so I can bring in more abundance? What about in my communication? Do I need a little bit more Gevurah boundary? Or do I need a little bit more Chesed and compassion? And then, what about in my, just in my personality, in how I present? Do I present as super loving? Do I present as kind of boundaried? Do I want to bring more balance into that? Do I want to lean into one more than the other? What feels more natural to me? How does it play into my relationship style pattern, which is Netzach, right? And then I'm like, in my relationships, do I need more boundaries there? And notice that like your communication pattern and your relationship pattern are two slightly different patterns. So how does Chesed and Gevurah play a role in how I communicate? Okay, well, how does it play a role in how I relate? What am I more comfortable with? Am I actually more comfortable with more Chesed when I'm giving more Chesed to people, or when people are giving more Chesed to me in relationship? Or do I feel actually safer when I can feel really good about giving the boundaries and that people are going to give me boundaries? Or does that feel like off-putting to me? And so these are the things we get to discover. And this is how I love to relate to these sfirot, is really deeply how they integrate to your personality. And so just for fun, I know I shared a little bit about this last week, but my abundance pattern is Gevurah. And this just means that from when I'm born, life is going to give me experiences that are going to particularly, we all have to develop all of them, particularly help me expand the attribute of Gevurah, of discernment and boundary and strength when it comes to how I receive abundance. My relationship pattern is also Gevurah, right? So I would love your questions. Your questions will really help if you want me to expand a little bit more into one or the other. Otherwise, I'm very excited. I have someone coming this weekend for a weekend-long Inner Aliyah immersion. If you have questions about that, let me know too. I hope you guys have a wonderful Shabbat, and we'll see you soon.